Welcome to the Thurston County Board of Health meeting this Tuesday, February 14th, 2023. My name is Maria Williams, Vice Chair of the Board of Health. To my left, I have here Board Member Edwards. Then I have Vasquez, Board Member Vasquez, Board Member Mejia, Board Member Harvey, and then Board Member Nelson. Calling this meeting to order at 4:30 p.m. Is there a motion regarding the proposed agenda?
I would move to approve the agenda for tonight.
Second.
Motion has been made and approved and second. Any discussions on the agenda from the board?
No, ma'am.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Agenda has been approved. First item on the list is proclamation for the National Children's Dental Health Month.
Who's up?
Jamie. Jamie, would you like to introduce our guests?
We've got some guests from the Hands On Children's Museum, and I believe, did any of the sponsoring dentists come along with you as well? Got a couple in the back there. Perfect. So if you guys would like, you're more than welcome to step on up to the podium, and you guys can go ahead and say a few words about it.
Is it okay now?
What's that?
I'm sorry.
Go ahead.
Well, we just wanted to, my name is Beth Garson. I'm the Marketing Communications Manager at the Hands On Children's Museum, and we wanted to thank you for this honor today. It's very exciting. This is the 23rd year that the Hands On Children's Museum has been celebrating the National Children's Dental Health Month. It's an opportunity for us to work with the local dentists in our community, especially Westside Dental. They're our presenting sponsor, Swedish Providence, which is our partner, and Small to Tall Pediatric Dentistry is our screening sponsor, and then we have our Dental Health Leadership Circle. What we do is we're able to offer children free dental screenings every Saturday in the month of February. And then we have wonderful activities that families can do all month long, including a Puget Sound Dental Health dental office exhibit, which the kids get to be the dentist. They have little lab coats and they have little dental checkup lists, and they can, there's a real dentist chair, and they can perform dental exams on a stuffed animal or their parents or their siblings. They can make tooth fairy pillows. They can learn about whale and maritime mouths and teeth, and learn the difference between shark teeth and whale teeth. And it's just a really wonderful month to be able to spotlight the real importance of children's dental health, and to be able to get them started in an environment that is friendly and inviting and not scary, and get them on the right path to good oral health. So if my friends want to say anything?
Sure. My name is Jordan Boer. This is my partner,
Kyle Winter.
and just want to thank you for allowing us the opportunity to be a part of such a wonderful event. I think it really makes a difference for children's introduction to their dental health to be such a positive one, and we're proud to be a part of this. So thank you.
Thanks for the opportunity.
Thanks.
We have someone from Swedish Medical, I believe.
Do we have someone from Swedish Medical?
So I'm Liz Seltzer. I am from Providence, Swedish, and we're delighted to partner on this event. It's very exciting to be able to be a part of all those exceptional activities and to further our community health priority of access to care, which is so key for kids especially, and dental health being foundational to health in all aspects. So thank you.
Thank you. Is there anyone else that would like to speak? Okay, we have our proclamation.
Well, this gives me a good opportunity to speak up for kids because a lot of the folks in this room have heard me say this quite a few times. Kids are 30% of our population, but they're 100% of our future. And if we don't get it right, we're in trouble. And this sure gives those kids the opportunity for better overall health because like it says in the proclamation, I mean, we know that that's a basis for good overall health to get started, so. Anyway, with that in mind, I'll read the proclamation. I guess that's my honor tonight, right? National Children's Dental Health Month. Whereas oral health is estimated essential to an individual's general health and quality of life, and whereas oral health connects to your overall health and it's integral to general health. And whereas Thurston County Public Health and Social Services has prioritized oral health in the 2024 Department Strategy Plan as a key approach needed to encourage healthy living. And whereas there are associations between oral health and diabetes, heart disease, lung disease, babies born low birth weight, and babies born prematurely, and a lot of other stuff I might add. Whereas Thurston County children are having difficulty accessing dental care and are experiencing preventable oral health issues. And whereas Thurston County children and adults are experiencing preventable dental pain and tooth loss. And whereas Thurston County Public Health and Social Services Oral Health Program is working with local partners, including the Thurston Oral Health Network, local school districts, and the Lewis Mason Thurston Area Agency on Aging to address oral health disparities. And whereas oral health should not be dependent on age, income, race, ethnicity, gender, or geography, and reducing oral health and disparities in Thurston County will have a meaningful impact on the health of local residents. And whereas the American Dental Association celebrates National Children's Dental Health Month every February as a month-long national health observance that brings together thousands of dedicated professionals, healthcare providers, and educators to promote the benefits of good oral health to children, their caregivers, teachers, and many others. Now therefore be it resolved, the Thurston County Board of Health hereby proclaims February as Children's Dental Health Month in Thurston County in recognition of the importance of the awareness of oral health and urges all residents to recognize the crucial importance of how oral health affects overall health. And this is adopted today, February 14th, 2023. And this is the first time this Board of Health has signed a declaration. Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
And who is going to get this? The chair gets to give that out, I think, right?
We all take a picture.
Are we going to take a picture? Do what I'm told.
It's pretty obvious when I'm like.
Awesome. 1, 2, 3. One more. Here we go. Okay. Awesome. Thank you.
I looked all around me and I was like, oh no.
And then I moved. I'll be sure to mail this on to you guys as soon as I'm back. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you so much for coming.
Nice to meet you, Kyle.
Next, we have a presentation from the Orca. Jamie, would you like to introduce?
So we've got the director of Orca here to kind of give an overview of what their agency does.
Okay, well, good afternoon, and again, thank you for the invitation to be with you this afternoon. My name is Jeff Johnston. I'm the Executive Director of the Olympic Region Clean Air Agency, or ORCA. I know don't have much time this afternoon, so was just planning to give just a very quick brief overview of the agency. But certainly if there's additional topics, additional questions, additional things that you'd like some follow-up or some more longer conversations on, can certainly follow up with you either individually or come back and meet with the board about things. So I believe that Jamie distributed a brochure, is your packet, so I've got hard copies as well, but this is just kind of a general brochure that provides a little bit of information about ORCA. ORCA is a local government agency. In 1967, the Washington Clean Air Act gave counties the authority to form air pollution control authorities and essentially to enforce local, state, and federal Clean Air Act laws and regulations. In 1968, 6 counties in our area came together to form what's now ORCA. So in addition to Thurston County, ORCA's jurisdiction includes Mason County, Jefferson County, Clallam County, Grays Harbor, and Pacific counties. So essentially the entire Olympic Peninsula and the coast and the entire Washington coast. So, and ORCA is one of 7 local air agencies in the state. For counties in Washington that don't have local air agencies, those counties contract with the Department of Ecology to provide the services that local airs provide. So, and I'll just say that San Juan County is the only county in western Washington that doesn't have local clean air agencies, but a number of counties east of the Cascades don't have local air agencies, and so work closely with the Department of Ecology. So ORCA's jurisdiction is very large, over 8,000 square miles, and we have a staff of 17, and so out of an office here in Olympia. So we've clearly partnerships, collaborations are really important for the work that we do. And during the roughly year that I've been in this position at ORCA, I've been really working to reach out to collaborators, partners, to establish and deepen relationships. And at the end of the day, ORCA really is a public health agency protecting public health in the air we breathe. And so again, look forward to future collaborations with the Board of Health. ORCA is accountable to our 9-member board. Board consists of a county commissioner from each of the 6 counties and city council members from each of our 3 largest cities. And the 3 largest cities are currently Lacey, Olympia, and Tumwater. So Thurston County, and in fact this Board of Health is well represented on the ORCA board with Commissioner Mejia and Council Member Vasquez both currently serving on the ORCA board. So ORCA essentially serves 4 basic functions. We permit what are called stationary sources, or the businesses that emit pollutants into the air, whether that's a neighborhood gas station or a large pulp and paper mill and everything in between. We also enforce federal, state, and local air quality regulations. We also monitor the air, monitor ambient air quality. So we've got monitoring stations in each of our 6 counties. The Thurston County monitor is at the Mountain View Elementary School in Lacey. And then we also work to educate the public regarding air quality issues. So in terms of how ORCA's work is funded, primarily paid for by fees and state and federal grants, grants from the US EPA and from the Department of Ecology. Fees include things that we charge for the permits that we issue to businesses, our asbestos notifications, that kind of thing. Also include assessments. So so counties, cities, municipalities pay a per capita assessment to ORCA, which currently is about a little less than 87 cents per person per year in our jurisdiction. So, okay, well that's kind of a very quick overview of what we do. I could talk very quickly about some recent efforts, or could open it up for some questions, some discussion.
Any questions from the board?
So if we're thinking 10 or 20 years into the future, what do you think the biggest health focuses that you can kind of work on that we should be thinking about or understanding?
From an air quality perspective, well, that's a great question. Well, certainly, our climate is changing, and so there will be changes in our in atmospheric chemistry, in our air because of that. And we've all experienced wildfire smoke in the past number of years, particularly past 3 or 4 years. There's been episodes in the summertime when we've got significant wildfire smoke. So I would say that, and as our climate continues to change, dealing with that is going to be something. And the pollutant that is of most concern to our jurisdiction is particulate pollution. And so that historically has come primarily from, say, home heating during the winter time, and pollution levels from particulate matter have gone down significantly in the past 20 or 30 years. But we are seeing some reversal of some of those trends, again, with these wildfire smoke episodes. So off the top of my head, I would say that would be kind of the biggest thing. And it's a bit of a challenge because, of course, we don't have really any local control over that, right? So we have to adapt. I mean, there's efforts around helping people prepare for wildfire smoke episodes. And in every May, there's what's called, I think, Wildfire Smoke Awareness Week. So there's a big media push, social media and other things, to get people aware of how they can protect their health during wildfire smoke episodes.
Another question, if that's okay. So I know like in King County and Pierce County, they have sort of asthma data on which areas of the cities are most impacted by air quality, like from the freeways or whatever. Do we have that for this region?
Yes, so a lot of that is kind of statewide data. So there's the State Department of Health has what's called the Washington Tracking Network that aggregates lots of air quality data from lots of sources. And so ORCA doesn't specifically have different information, but I would say the Washington Tracking Network is a tool, is probably the best tool that I'm aware of to have local data. Certainly the EPA has a variety of tools as well.
Great, thank you.
Sure.
Any other questions from the board? Okay.
Okay, well, one thing I'll just mention, I know the county is getting ready to launch a new website. ORCA next week will be launching our own new website. We've been working on it for about a year, and so as of next Wednesday, we'll have a lot more information on our website, so I would encourage you to go look at that, especially after next Wednesday when our new site's up. So.
And that website will be?
It's www.orcaa.org, so orca.org.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much.
And now we have the opportunity for the public to address the Board of Health. Is there anyone in the public?
There was no one on the sign-up sheet.
Zoom either?
Sign up.
Oh, they still need to be- Moving on to the next item. So the next item on the list is permitting options for temporary food establishments that propose to operate year-round at multiple venues without connection to a public event. Sammy Berg, Senior Environmental Health Specialist.
Hi, good afternoon. And as you mentioned, my name is Sammy Berg. I'm a Senior Environmental Health Specialist with Environmental Health. And I've supervised the Food and Environmental Services section. I've been doing that for over 12 years now. But we're here to talk about and report back to a situation that started back in May of last year. And for the new board members, I'm going to talk a little bit about basic food safety, just to kind of help bring you on board. It will be in order to keep things on a timely fashion, it will be a very high-level thing, and as is mentioned by others, I'd be more than happy to have further conversations with y'all individually or come back and do more thorough presentation on that. But we'll dig into food safety, and of course, it all comes starting with The mission statement, protect and promote the health of the Thurston County community now and in the future. Our role in that process is to use the state food code and Article 2 of our sanitary code. The food code's kind of the technical aspects of all that. Things need to be hot or cold or clean. Wash your hands, please. That's one of our mantras. Article 2 is more the business side of how we administer that, the permit costs, how we deal with appeals, and kind of just the mechanics of that process. The main thing that we do is we do plan reviews, which is people giving us applications, and we talk about stuff on paper and try to make sure that it's all going to work well and get feedback. And then we then move into doing inspections out in the field and looking at new facilities, looking at temporary booths, making sure that what they asked to do is actually what they are doing. So food safety in Washington is at the local level. So we have a state food code, but the implementation of that is at the jurisdictional level, at the county level. And again, the state food code, which is 149 pages of excellent reading. But basically, it's a lot of technical details, which guides a lot of how we do food. And if you can imagine that there are many, many different ways to make food, many different types of foods. And so that has to cover just a very wide breadth of everything from I make coffee to I make sushi and everything in between to cover all those details. And then again, we have Article 2, which talks about the business. We have 6 inspectors to go do all these food inspections. We have 1,000 food permits. So every year, that's the number of businesses that we have in Thurston County that do food at the retail level. And then we also have hundreds of vendors that do temporary food. All the fair, festival, farmers markets vendors are part of that mix as well. Thank you. So any food that's prepared for the public needs to be done, prepared in a safe fashion. And we walk through how that happens. The state food code is set up with varying standards depending on the needs. And there's parts of it that talk about, like, if you're going to make a brick and mortar restaurant, these are the things you need to do. And if you have a booth pop-up kind of thing for a festival, these are the kinds of things you do. But the main distinction is that the trade-off is if you're going to do routine food every day, then there are higher standards about the equipment and the facilities you bring to that effort. And if you're going to be out there for a weekend making food, then there are lower standards to allow that to happen down at the lake or whatnot. But the idea is that that's going to be one weekend's worth of effort versus 365 days a year. And our permits are structured in that same fashion. We have annual permits for routine food, and we have temporary permits for occasional food. So for temporary food events, fairs, festivals, markets, most of our vendors come out and they do one event. I'm going to go be at Lake Fair. I'm going to go do the Wooden Boat Festival. My civics group is going to make hamburgers, and that's our big fundraiser, things like that. We also have folks that are more professional, and so they will do circuits of all the festivals. And they may do 6 or 7 different events in Thurston County as part of that circuit. Same process. They tell us what they want to do. We review it. We go out and inspect them while they're out there and fix any issues that need to be addressed to make that all safe. As part of that, in May of last year, we had a vendor that wanted to kind of come into the middle zone between occasional food and routine food. And they wanted to use that same booth setup, but wanted to operate for most of the weekends of the year. And so that was the request brought to the board, and then the direction was to see if we can find a regulatory pathway to allow that to happen, and then to run kind of a pilot program on how that works, and then come back to the board at the end of the year and say, hey, this is how it worked, this is the lessons we learned, and this is how we think we want to move forward with that. And that's why we're here today. So what we did, when you're doing temporary food, you have a lot of allowances. Your hand washing is essentially an igloo cooler with a bucket underneath, and that's where you're gonna wash your hands. Your cold holding to keep things cold is a cooler vise, and you've got like a hibachi or some sort of griddle or something you're cooking things with. You've got a booth, maybe a tarp. That's what you got. And that's, again, the what's allowed for occasional food. The downside to that is that it's everything that you need, you'll need to bring each and every time you set things up. And as opposed to a restaurant where you leave at the end of the day, turn the lights out, and come back the next day, turn the lights back on, and the power's there, the water's there, the refrigerators are there, everything works. You haven't forgotten anything because there's nothing to bring back. And then also, the weather, of course, plays a huge impact on how hot is it, how cold is it, how windy is it. Those all impact your ability to keep things hot or cold or clean. And so those are some of the challenges for the temporary side of things. So when we looked at how can we make this work and how can we move forward, we were kind of trying to balance a couple different ways. One would be this particular vendor with their desire to sit in that middle ground. We also have, again, 1,000 annual permits. So people that have gone through all this process to look at and get approval as a brick and mortar restaurant and those needs. We also have more than 50 mobile food truck operators who have put a lot of effort into getting approval as a food truck or trailer. And then we have several hundred, again, temporary folks. So we have this whole body of people that we're dealing with on a routine basis, and we're also trying to keep their needs in mind as well, as far as consistency of effort and what they can expect. And then, of course, we have the much broader eating public, 300,000 some odd people. I, a while ago, did the math, and it just was odd to think that easily in Thurston County, 1 million meals are made and consumed every day. And that's just a pretty shocking number. And, we're all out there eating food and doing all that, and the vast majority of times that's a safe thing, and that's great. So, but the eating public is definitely part of this balancing act as well, because their expectations are they're going to go someplace, they're going to buy food, and it's going to be safe. And that's our charge to do. So, but as part of this, we are always looking to see how we can improve things. Sometimes we're having to make changes because we find out that salad greens can be contaminated by E. coli, and we need to figure out how to do that safer. We figure out that, we end up with, the community wants to use reusable containers, and how do we fit that in? How do we reduce the use of disposable gloves and still be safe? And so those are many of the things that we look at and try to make adjustments to, as well as taking feedback from all of our customers and trying to fit that in. So we came up with the draft policy based on what happened in the summertime and our experiences with that, and I'll go into that in just a little bit detail in just a bit. Moving forward, our main proposal is that we want folks that want to do routine food with a booth setup. We were working with them as under our temporary framework and our permits and whatnot. And we want to move them over to treat them like a food truck, but the code has specific requirements to that. But we have the ability to do a variance, which allows us to say, we can still meet these safety needs in a different way. And so we can say, well, you don't necessarily need a truck or a trailer. You can still use a booth setup, but we're going to put you in this framework of routine food, annual permit, the reviews that go with that, and allow them to do their food in a safe fashion. Part of that comes with them having some added training and some added equipment that we're going to ask for as part of our proposal. That's going to basically step their game up a little bit from the temporary side. And part of that is bringing in a refrigerator that is portable, bringing in a hand wash cabinet for warm water instead of just a bucket of water, and some added training. And one of the main things too is our review and their proposal of having a menu that matches the equipment that they're going to bring. And that's been one of the keys that we've seen is what's going to make this a successful thing. We can go to the next slide soon. So the things that have worked well for the folks that did this pilot project was they had a commissary, they had a commercial kitchen that they were working out of or to store and prepare a lot of their foods. They had a menu that was right-sized to what they were trying to do and the equipment they were bringing. Having a refrigerator and a hand wash sink. We would approve their sales location so that we make sure that's a good match between where they're trying to do their food sales and do they need any additional support from that location? Do they need water? Do they need a place to dump their water? Do they need power for their refrigerators, things like that? And they need to take some enhanced food safety training, which is a new code requirement for anyone doing restaurant level food. So we're putting them in that same bucket with all the other restaurant owners, and that's one of the new requirements this year is this food manager training. So if we get to the next slide, from the vendor perspective, of course, a fair amount of this comes down to, well, what's it going to cost me? And we're always very sensitive to that as well. Our annual permit for a food truck is $610, and for comparison, what they would have paid for their temporary side would have been $500, so, a little bit more. One of the key differences is, under the state food code, a temporary event can only happen up to 3 days a week. And so that was one of the limitations that they had over last year, that they could only operate 3 days a week. And this would allow them to operate 7 days a week. And also, as part of this annual permit, they are free to do all the fairs and festivals that they want to during the course of the calendar year. So it's a little bit more money, but it certainly gives them a lot more opportunity to sell, and doesn't limit them to just sitting in front of the tap room, which would be like what they do, for most of the time, but it still allows them access to all the fairs and festivals and the high volume kinds of events. As part of this, we have a structure that would say, hey, if you need a variance, if you need this specific approval that's from code, then there's a review process and a fee associated with that. And part of putting this together, we understood that the folks that were part of the pilot project, we've already done that review as part of what we're doing, so we won't charge them that fee as we move into this next phase. There's an application fee for the review under the mobile food permit, and so they'll have to do that. And then there's equipment costs. A quick estimate was about $5,000 for that kind of startup costs and things. But in comparison, it's easily $50,000 to $100,000 for a food truck or food trailer. And of course, brick and mortar is going to be much more than that. So this is a way for them to bridge an idea and start a business for a relatively small amount of capital and see their proof of concept, start selling their food and seeing if that works, and then being able to move into something that's going to be more long-term. I'm trying to see. Okay. The other side of it, so that's the vendor perspective. The other side of it would be from, the next slide would be from the customer side. Like, how is this safe food? And part of that would be that we do this review as, we're gonna review them as they're gonna do food day in, day out. And so how are they gonna support that? What equipment are they bringing? And again, we're asking for a couple pieces of extra equipment. We're looking for that commissary. We're looking for the menu that they're gonna use that's going to, again, fit what they're proposing to use. And the food safety training, again, as part of the code requirement. So all those things help balance the not having a food truck or food trailer. Okay, so what was the result of the pilot program? So we had 5 vendors that went through this process last year that said, I want to do more than the temporary. I want to sit in this middle zone, and I want to do occasional food or routine food. 2 or 3 were very good, and 2 vendors had significant problems. The key factors for the folks that were successful were professional experience and menus that were sized to the right place. The Carbon Pop, Patrick was the vendor that came to the board last year and had this initial request. And we inspected him several times and had lots of conversations with him about his operation. And in hindsight, he was this model vendor. He was a professional, he knew the food business, he brought the right equipment, and what he wanted to do was, I'm gonna make a hamburger, and your options are cheese, no cheese, and you want a bag of chips. That's all he was doing. That's very simple. He wasn't trying to do chicken, he wasn't trying to do bacon, he wasn't trying to do oatmeal or whatever else was going on. Keep it simple, and you're gonna be over here, you're gonna get your beer, I'm gonna give you a burger, everyone's happy. But he had all the right equipment, all the knowledge to make that a very smooth operation, a very safe one. We had OG Smokehouse was the barbecue unit, and they have actually a very beautiful commercial-made barbecue trailer with sinks on it and lots of other supportive equipment. And they do the same thing. They have set themselves up to make it as easy for themselves to routinely make good food. And that's part of, they're not trying to take a pork shoulder and smoke it for 16 hours. They're going to keep to the smaller meats where they know they can just do it, cook it, serve it, keep it easy on their staff, make it safe for the customers. But, they had the experience to make that work. On the other side, we had 2 vendors that had a lot of challenges, and the main problem that they ran into was they were not foodies. We had a hardware store that wanted to sell Traeger barbecue smoker units, so they were going to do hot dogs. None of the staff had food experience. We inspected them 6 times, which is a lot for temporary things. Each time had significant problems. They had more problems than anyone has ever had making hot dogs. It's really pretty straightforward, but they didn't have the staff, they didn't have the experience. And we could have worked with the same staff over and over, and we could have got them where they needed to be, but they didn't have that. They didn't have the staff to be able to dedicate to that kind of effort. They were just trying to throw it together every time we met with them, and that was not successful. The other group was a community group that was trying to raise funds by selling chicken, and we'll have some photos of that shortly. But again, no real experienced volunteers who wanted to really participate and be supportive of their community group, but the lack of experience was very telling. So we can go to the next menu. So this is the community group, and they're selling chicken on the side of the road. They got a nice line of people there, and then if you go to the next slide, so they had these large Costco white plastic tables. That table on the front side was where they would take these big skewers and load up with raw chicken and then throw them on the trailer and cook it. So that table in the front had been used for several hours, and basically they have this table covered with some saran wrap, but they had made no efforts to keep that clean over several hours. So that's all just not rotten, but raw chicken juices just stewing in the sun. And a number of other things that we can just go into lots of details over about what was not working well, but mainly they didn't have the experience and the knowledge to make it work. We had to tell them, no, sorry, you have to stop for today because this is wrong on a number of levels, and we worked with them to try to make that better. But again, they were trying to use food as a vehicle to something else versus, I'm here to sell food. And that distinction is where we saw success versus not success. And so we're really happy to look forward and work with the vendors who are going to come with that intent. I'm here to sell food. This is my job. And they bring the intent and the knowledge and the experience to make that work well. And we're happy to work with them. So the draft policy is going to say we want to use a mobile food permit, an annual permit. We've got an upfront review process with a variance, we'll add some equipment. And then once they get through that, then every year it's just a renewal process. And so it should be fairly streamlined for them. And then on the other side, for the temporary things, we want to try to make some good separation between routine and occasional. And we want to limit this type of operation where it's not a fair or festival, it's just a vendor wanting to do one thing. We call that a self-event. So like if a business wants to have an anniversary sale or grand opening, they say, hey, we'll cook some burgers and try to get some public done. We allow that, but we're going to limit that to 4 times a year to really just kind of let's keep that occasional, and we can do it safely, but we're going to make that separation between, oh, I want to be in front of a business every weekend. That's over here on the routine side. So that's the proposal. We've talked to, I like Carbon Pop Patrick and the operator from the OG Smokehouse. We've talked and sent this message out to the Washington Hospitality Association, to the Washington State Food Truck Association. We've worked with Jenica to have that go out through the Economic Development Council, try to solicit feedback. The 2 main vendors that we've dealt with, I had conversations with them recently, and they understand there's going to be some added cost to them and some process, but they are supportive of moving forward in that way. They see the value of it, and primarily from their perspective, that allows them full flexibility to operate 7 days a week, and the added costs or whatnot are well worth it. What we're planning to do is allow them to transition as we move from their temporary permits to their annual permits. They'll be able to continue to operate, so we're going to give them some time to go through the process and the paperwork and adding the equipment. So by the time, hopefully by the time we hit the summer, they'll be fully up to speed, but it won't be where we say, well, you have to stop this and then shift gears. So it'll be hopefully a pretty smooth transition. Anyway, a lot of talking. So that's the proposal, that's the report back, that's been our experience. Of course, we'll be more than happy to continue the feedback process and understand and work with our vendors and the stakeholders. I know that we're asking you all to not necessarily make a decision today, but we'll come back next month and you can give us some direction on that, and certainly more opportunities to ask questions. And any other feedback we do get from those other community groups or stakeholders, we'll certainly bring back to you and let you know their feelings if they're not able to make it themselves. And that is my presentation. So I know there are a lot at you, so please feel free to ask questions, and I'll do my best to give you some answers.
Any questions from the board members? Vasquez?
So to be clear, this sort of variance and food truck combination process is not for food trucks, because we already have sort of a designated process for them.
Right.
It's for organizations that might not be at that level where they could purchase a truck.
Right.
But for folks that want to do routine sales of food, and that's their primary focus.
Yeah,
One
so
step down maybe from
so
a food
think,
truck level of professionalism.
a booth kind of set up.
Yeah.
Right.
Okay.
Yeah,
But
so it's a.
sounds like you drew a lot of lessons learned from supporting food trucks, which has been a
Right, and we
very
have
active
talked
industry.
to the other health jurisdictions in the state. We've talked to the state health department. We are, of course, not alone in this kind of thing, but we are on the edge of kind of figuring out how we can make this better for our needs and their needs. And so we're kind of the leaders of this pilot project, and others are paying attention to see how that works.
I have one more question, if that's all right. You said the way to make this successful is to ensure that the folks that are doing this have the equipment that matches the menu.
Right.
Are there types of food that maybe just wouldn't be a good idea or would not be supported through the draft policy for sales?
So-
Like sushi, for instance.
Right. So, like, sushi actually is a really good example. If they had a commercial kitchen and they were making their sushi at the kitchen and they were coming out to sell sushi at their booth and they had a refrigerator, all they're doing, their only chore is keep it cold and don't touch it with your bare hands. That's pretty straightforward, and that can easily happen.
Right.
But what we don't want is, like the community group, let's take a bunch of raw chicken and not have the way to keep our surfaces clean and sanitized, and try to do a lot of that. But like we could take a bunch of chicken in the commissary kitchen, prep it all, maybe cook it beforehand and cool it. And then now all I'm doing is I've got some chicken, I can reheat it and throw it in a wrapper of bread or whatever, that thing is. So it really depends on the menu, but also what they're trying, how they're trying to do it. The burger is a real good example. You can do a burger and make it all by hand, and add lettuce and tomatoes and a lot of other moving parts. Or this guy did a scoop of, he had a scooper, and he just threw it on the griddle, had a press, made it really thin, so it was very hard to undercook it. And took one condiment, basically threw it on there. You want cheese? Here you go. Really simple, kept all of his needs down to a bare minimum. And so, or you could like do the Red Robin model where, we're gonna do 40 different flavors of chicken and burgers, and all of that is complexity and need. And so how do you size it to the right bit? But
It's
yeah,
harder to do that safely in a
Right.
temporary setup.
it's more likely, we're probably gonna be more of match the menu to the limited amount of equipment that you're able to bring. So, yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Any other questions from the board?
Did the vendors that you've been working with know that you would be here tonight, for an example, presenting this to the board, and then they know that maybe next month we might make a decision on something?
Yeah, so for, again, the OG Smokehouse and Carbon Pop, I talked to both about our proposal. We walked through the details, talked about today as an opportunity for us to present to the board, and that they would likely then come back next month. And we'd be happy to either direct them here, and you can talk to them directly, or take whatever feedback they have and give it to you. So, yes.
Thank you.
Board member Blake.
I have quite a couple questions.
Please.
Okay, so my first question is in regards to the portable sink and refrigerator.
Yeah.
Right, and how we got to that point of needing that. I know, that wasn't in the previous one, so
Right.
how did we land here with those two?
So, and food is very trendy, right? And there's a lots of movement within the industry. And, what's one of the things that comes to my mind is, the whole, here is your sandwich deconstructed, And so we were trying to think of that model, like, here's your food truck deconstructed. What are the parts that really make a food truck successful? Part of it's the shell that gives you the shelter and, keeping everything in one thing. But some of the main things from a food safety perspective are, we have a mechanical refrigerator that is going to function day in, day out and be very reliable and consistent. And it's the consistency of the equipment that we were looking for. And refrigeration and hand washing are two of the highest priorities in food safety that we want to make. So having a mechanical refrigerator that is going to, regardless if it's 50 degrees out or 100 degrees out, going to give you very cold storage, plug it in and it works. It's not, did you bring enough ice? So that perspective. And then on the mechanical or the hand wash cabinet is that it is something like, looks like this, but it has a sink, a pump, and a little heater. And it's a rolling unit. It's very easy to be portable. But it has a 5-gallon tank, and it can heat up and be hand washed. And there's, no barriers whatsoever for them to be able to easily wash their hands and not have to deal with a cooler that has a push button that have to do the one-handed thing, or they didn't put water in. The vendor that was doing the hot dogs, or trying to do the hot dogs, one of their problems they had actually twice was that they filled this big igloo cooler up with soapy water for their hand wash. And they didn't quite understand, like, well, how are you going to get the soap off your hands if all the water is soapy? So trying to avoid those kinds of things. Or like, we forgot that. We forgot the cooler, we forgot the soap, we forgot the paper towels. These cabinets tend to have all the bits and pieces added, and they have storage for extra and whatnot. So trying to make the consistency of the equipment and those two key pieces, refrigeration and hand washing, as stable as we can for the vendor, that's what's seen as a need to move things up from, again, the occasional side of food over to day in, day out routine food service.
So then that's my follow-up question, where some of the food vendors that you had issues were, as you said, they were not frequent, but the more regular ones tend to work in tap rooms or tend to work in already established places where they do have those, you know, kind of washroom, or they have hand washing stations. And so
Right.
I'm just, the redundancy in that, I'm just kind of wondering, like,
Sure.
why add another piece to it?
Well, as a perfect example, if that was a tap room and I'm sitting in the parking lot selling burgers, inside your building is where the restroom is and a sink, or there's a small kitchen back there and that's where the sink is. If I'm selling burgers and dealing with my customers and I need to wash my hands, I'm not going to leave my booth to just go, even if it's 20 feet around the corner through a door, wash my hands. That doesn't happen. So the hand wash needs to be within the booth space, and that's for any food service. It needs to be convenient because we know if it's not convenient, it doesn't happen. Now, we did talk to like OG Smokehouse where they were talking about refrigerators, and he uses a lot of refrigeration space because he brings a lot of raw meat to throw on his trailer. And he was thinking, do I need a giant refrigerator to make this work? And we realized that, well, no, you're working at Northwest Beer Works, and they already have an arrangement for him to be able to store things in their refrigerator. So all he needs is a little refrigerator to get his little cup of, potato salad or whatever the customer wants, but the bulk of it can be back in the bar. So that's where we have that sales location support the vendor. And so that'll be part of that evaluation. Like, oh, you have that need. Oh, they have that service. Great. We match it up. Things are working great. So that's part of that conversation, that review process that we have.
Thank you. My next is more of a suggestion. Maybe for the next time where we discuss this, it would be great to have a comparison of what the pilot program was and what the new additions are. I know
Sure.
you have that like in kind of separate pages, but just in a one-page format of, that way we're able to track it of, this was what the pilot program, these are the proposed changes for, or in addition to, it would just be easier to kind of do the compare, especially with the cost.
Sure.
That
Yep.
being an increase. My next question, I apologize. I have, in terms of have their cell locations approved. And I was wondering, it looks like that's a new proposal, right? And kind of how we got to having, I know last year it was one of the discussions we had, well, do we limit it to certain locations? We decided not to go that avenue and kind of just open it. And so kind of how will that work, having the sales locations approved, especially in the summer? I know that's when a lot of the tap rooms start wanting to promote their business by having different pop-ups come
Right.
and they do little events.
Sure. And the main thing will be, from the vendor's perspective, what are they bringing and what do they need? And if they need added refrigeration, if they need something, power, water, or extra space, whatever that is, we're going to want to make that match. And so as long as we can make that match, that's going to work fine. We're at this point not proposing that we're going to limit, oh, you can only have 2 locations or 3 locations or whatever. It's just that we want to have that conversation about, will that location support what you're wanting to do? Most of them will be somewhat self-limiting because they want to, they'll get that business arrangement and relationship with that vendor or the tap room or whatever. And so it won't be 20 different locations, but we don't have a hard number to say, oh, that's the max. It's mainly, will that location support what you want to do? And that was part of the evaluation of, with what happened this year, that again, the folks that were successful had those relationships, had that support, and went back to the same places over and over again and knew where they could set up, what they could expect. The customers understood it. The business owner came to understand what to expect and the needs are, and it worked very well.
Have one more. In terms of putting it under the food truck code.
Yeah.
And so last time we discussed this, it was basically it didn't fit. It was kind of what we came down to, but now you're saying it can actually fit?
So, and part of this was just a mind switch, and we've always had in the state food code and certainly through a lot of other ordinances, we have a variance process, which is basically us saying, we can meet this safety need or this standard in a different way than what the code says. And so we realized that functionally, these are folks that are going to be, multiple times a year. They're going to be at different locations. They're going to have that evaluation of, I want to do this, and this is the stuff I'm bringing with it to make it work. And so the process, the mental evaluation of it, the whole package was very similar to food trucks. And so we have that variance, which allows them to be kind of that booth setup with some added pieces. That then works, and it's much closer to a much better fit. And we hadn't really thought about that last time. And that was, again, a great outcome from doing the pilot, was to realize, this isn't really working, but this will work better. So that's what we came up with. And again, that was part of the discussion we had with both the vendors and the food safety folks at the state and other jurisdictions. And there was a pretty good agreement that that would be a good place to be at. The variance is an existing process. There's nothing new there. It's allowed by code. Basically, what this would entail would be the board providing us feedback on, is this the pathway that sounds right for you all, for us to take and work with our vendors? But really, there's no, beyond more like policy procedural level, there's nothing higher up that needs to happen. So it's a framework that we can take advantage of.
Thank you.
Yeah.
And then I'll come back, and I just want to share Patrick's. I spoke with Patrick Soderberg, who was the first person who kind of brought up this issue, and I actually saw him at Beer Works. And I kind of stepped aside and had a conversation with him about, how this process was working out for him, and for him to share my experience and let him know that we were going to be discussing this as a Board of Health. And what he relayed was that his experience has been really positive with the pilot program. And I think just a big positive in it is the fact that instead of paying around between $400 to $500 for 4 events, now he has the ability to do it all year long, that was one of the big issues and that we were facing last year. And from that, he's been able to save up to kind of open up his new permanent place. And so I think this is one of the things as a Board of Health that we have to really think about. This is really an investment in our small business communities, and so it was just kind of great to hear that from him, and great to hear that there's a possibility of an avenue to make this a long-term, either with the failures as well as successes, and I'm just thankful about the pilot program and kind of being able to test out how that would work out, because we do have to, while promoting one side of things, we also have to measure out public safety as well. So thank you.
You're welcome. And it worked well for us as well. And I think one of the community need, the commissaries, in the past, that had been a very limited resource, and you basically had to have a personal relationship with a restaurant owner in order to get in the door and say, hey, can I come for 2 hours on a Friday and do some prep and then go do my thing? And now we have, at this point, 2, and there's a 3rd commissary that's specifically built to support food trucks and temporary vendors and whatnot in the community. And that's not a county thing. That's a business person wanting to meet that need, but that's a great resource. And we're very happy working with those folks. That will make that process easier for someone to say, I have this idea. I'm going to come in for just a couple hours, borrow a kitchen, go set my thing up, sell some food, and start building towards somewhere where I want to be. So yeah, very exciting.
So I was just wondering, with sort of there not being too many of these new startups, would you have the bandwidth to support them for their first year or so, to be able to watch them a little bit more and educate them and make sure that it's worth them continuing that process? Sort of like you did, like you had the 2 camps, you sort of had the safe camp and the a little higher risk camp. And I was just curious if you felt like you could continue that support.
So we had 5 folks that wanted to to participate in this last year. We don't anticipate that there'll be a lot of people that will go for this. It'll definitely be the people that are in that middle. I mean, some people are happy, they're gonna do a couple of weekends and that's their deal. It's a side gig. And there are other people like, I'm going full steam and I'm getting a truck. So there's really likely be a relatively small number of people there. And we do have the bandwidth for that, but also that's part of that upfront plan review process and whatnot. And we're really going to, that's where we put the proof in as far as they've got a great plan, they've thought it through. We've got a good process on how to match that up, and so their needs are going to be met by what they're bringing. And then our job's going to be simple. We're just going to have to come out and validate. Yep, that looks great. Keep going, kind of approach.
Cool.
Yeah.
Any other questions from the board? Okay. No other questions?
All right.
Thank you.
Well, thank you for your time, and I'll be back next month.
Next item, we have Integrated Pest Management Program Review, Patrick Soderberg, Hazardous Waste Specialist 3.
This is the real Patrick's going to step up.
Thank you, Board, for letting me present tonight. What I'm going to do is, this is just informative about the county's integrated pest management policy. The Board of Health and the Board of County Commissioners have a role within the policy. And later on this spring, we're going to have some of our departments come up and request that you make a decision on adopting some of their prescriptions. So I want to go through our policy today and the roles and how it's implemented so that you can ask questions now before you get presented to by a department with a request to approve one of their prescriptions. So the county adopted the integrated pest management policy in 1989 based on citizens' concerns over the county's use of pesticides. The policy only applies to county-managed properties or county property or property that we manage with contractors. So let me repeat that because I said that horribly. So it just applies to county properties, properties that the county manages or our contractors manage. Okay, and so the intent is to set an example of integrated pest management that minimizes the use of pesticides. The county defined integrated pest management as an approach to pest and vegetation control that emphasizes non-chemical tactics to prevent intolerable damage, annoyance, or public safety hazards. When chemicals are necessary to use, they'll be the least toxic available and will only be used when no other control methods would be effective or practical. The policy starts with having the departments produce program documents that state what properties they control, what types of pest and vegetation issues that they're expected to control. Within that, they have their guidelines, how they're going to operate safely, how they're going to manage everything according to labels, as well as they develop standard operating procedures or control procedures that we refer to as prescriptions. These prescriptions are either site-specific or they're specific to a pest. So these prescriptions, and this is a front page of one of our prescriptions for a noxious weed control. So what they do is they research the pest or vegetation problem, and then they come up with a control methods. Primarily, they're trying to look for avenues that don't use chemicals. So if they can prune something out, if they can overseed, if they can do preferential plantings to, eliminate or crowd out weeds and not have to kill them directly, they'll do so. Mulching and hand pulling, use of mechanical tools are preferred over chemical controls. So the prescription components starts with monitoring of a problem, both before control is taken and after control is taken. to evaluate efficacy. The, whoever is, department is managing this problem, they set an injury level at how, how great does this problem get before we have to do some sort of control? Whether it's rodents or stinging insects or a nuisance weed or a noxious weed that's mandated for control by the state. So you set that injury level, and at that point in time, that's when the county goes out and does some sort of control. The timing is, when do you take those actions so that you get the greatest long-term effects, so that we do it once or at a specific time so that it has the greatest efficacy. And then the selecting of strategies is, are there mechanical, manual ways to do it first that we can keep it under the threshold that needs increased control before we have to resort to chemical controls? So that's what would be part of the selecting strategy. And then after those controls, then the monitoring would come back in, and you monitor to see how effective you were and whether or not you can, if you used chemical controls, if you can downgrade back to non-chemical controls, or if you have to continue those controls until it is below that injury level. When those prescriptions are made and chemical controls are being requested or recommended, they specifically state which pesticide products they want to use. And once they determine which chemicals they want to use, the Environmental Health Department goes and reviews those chemicals for their potential hazards. So in the policy, all of those things, the active ingredients, other ingredients, degradation chemicals, all of these things get looked at critically to determine whether or not these are high hazard or medium hazard or low hazard chemicals. So all of those things get taken into account when we do the review. The policy states that a chemical or active ingredient is considered high hazard if it has the potential to cause carcinogenicity, developmental toxicity, reproductive toxicity, mutagenicity, persistence with bioaccumulation, or mobility with persistence, if it's a highly toxic chemical. If it's mobile and persistent but a very low toxicity, then we consider that our second tier. So high hazard, kind of medium hazard, and then if it doesn't have any of those components, then it would be considered low hazard, because there would be no identifiable hazards associated with it. The next slide shows just, you're not going to be able to read it. I'm just showing you 2 out of 3 of the pages of the technical reviews that we look at the, can you go to the next slide, please? So that breaks down, like, by the chemical, what is its ability to be mobile in the environment. Does it solubilize in water? Does it attach very tightly to organic material in the soil so that it would be not prone to runoff? How persistent is it? Does it degrade in sunlight? Does it break down with interaction with water? So we evaluate all of those things to try to determine whether or not it's a high hazard chemical. We look at non-target organisms to see at the application rate that we put it out at, what is the potential risk to non-target organisms. We look at short-term risk to any person that could be exposed to that after the application, as well as we look at the long-term risk to the applicators, which would be either our contractors or our employees. So we look at both short-term and long-term potential effects to anybody who might encounter these pesticide chemicals after we've applied them or while they're being applied. Once the environmental health does their review on the chemicals and the prescription is completed, then it goes to the advisory committee. So we have a citizen advisory committee that has up to 9 members. I believe right now we have 8. And they review with the department staff the actual prescription that they have, and they go through the whole document, they ask questions, and their goal is to provide advice to the Board of Health on whether or not they believe that the prescription fits the policy. And that's their role. And so they evaluate, they look at the chemical that's being proposed. And so I work for the Environmental Health Department. I'm actually the one who does all those reviews. And so I sit with them and go through the chemical review and let them ask questions and try to get them to understand what the potential hazards are, and how we plan to use it. Because the review is always worst-case scenario, but how we use it may be different than what the label allows. Sometimes we're just spot spraying, although the worst-case scenario might be a broadcast application to an entire yard, which we would not do. So they have me available to kind of bring those two messages together. Here's what the risk was, here's how we intend to use it. Then they look at the prescription itself, ask questions to the department about, their monitoring, their injury level, make sure that they understand what the goals are for, controlling the pest problem. And then they provide a recommendation to either adopt it or reject it to the Board of Health. And so they do that in a public meeting, just like what I'm doing right now. I put my papers on top of each other. What's the next slide? So the Board of Health review, when it comes back to you, I'm sorry. So I'm going to have to turn because I don't even have that page. Yeah, thank you. So any prescription that requests to have any application to a sensitive environment requires the Board of Health to approve it. And so the way our sensitive environments are defined in the policy, it includes any wetland, any water body, any roadside ditch. And so most of our prescriptions, except for the ones in our buildings, would fall under those categories. And any one that has a high hazard chemical written in it requires the Board of Health to approve it as well. The criteria that you would use to make your decision would be that the pest and vegetation problem has been assessed and the action level has been met. The use of pesticides is necessary element in the pest and vegetation prescription, and the risk to public health, groundwater, or the environment is determined to be minimal. So that would be the criteria that you would evaluate when the advisory committee would say, we recommend or don't recommend it. Sometimes they don't recommend adoption. So this next slide is more of to put that all kind of briefly in. A department writes a prescription. It gets reviewed by the advisory committee. They look at both what they're proposing to take action on, as well as the chemical components that they're proposing to use. They make a recommendation, and the Board of Health says either, yes, it follows the policy and we want to adopt it, or they say, you can say, no, we would rather have you rework it, or we don't want that executed. And that would be the process.
Thank you.
And I am your Integrated Pest Management Program Coordinator, which is also a role in the policy. And so my role is to be staff support to you. So if you have questions, that's how you would get a hold of me. And I can answer questions both on as far as the policy goes, as well as any of the reviews for any of the ingredients or pesticide products.
Thank you. Any questions from the board members?
Just a
Board
real
questions?
foundational question. Can you give examples of the types of sites that would be managed by a contractor?
I'm going to say not a, okay, so, well, all of our grounds right now are being managed by a landscaping contractor. So all of the grounds around all of the county buildings and our formal landscapes, and they don't use any pesticides for that.
But this policy would apply to situations like that, so the grounds
Correct.
that are managed by the county through our contract with that that grounds landscaping company.
That is correct.
Okay, I wanted to know, like, what types of places are we talking about considering when we use pesticides under this?
Right, so an interesting situation would be like Glacial Heritage Preserve, which is out kind of by Mima Mounds on the Black River. And the county owns it, but well, they used to be the Nature Conservancy. I don't remember what they're called. The Bureau of Natural Land Management manages it now. So they manage it for us. But they have a prescription specifically for that property and how they manage it.
Okay, thank you.
And you always stay within the guidelines set by the state, is that right?
100%.
Yeah.
Yep.
Any other questions from the board? Okay. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much.
Yeah. This is really good information.
Next, we have, forgive me if I say this incorrectly, ophthalmologist.
Close, Dr. A, or Dr. A.
Dr. A.
Dr.
Dr. A
A.
is totally.
That's what I use.
Thank you. I'll use Dr. A.
Good evening, Board of Health. I'm Dr. Abdul Malik, and I'm the Thurston County Health Officer, and I'm here to give my health officer report. We're going to stay fairly high level today. So first, I wanted to give a quick update on COVID-19. Our community level, which is just that composite of transmission and healthcare capacity, continues to be low. Our case rate for DOH is 58.4 cases per 100,000 over the past 7 days, and 128.5 cases per 100,000 over the past 14. Looking at our hospitalization rate from CDC for the week ending February, I believe, 12th, we're looking at 5.8 hospitalizations per 100,000 over the past 7 days, with COVID positive patients making up about 3.6% of staffed beds and 1% of our ICU beds. So we're in a, as far as things go for the pandemic, we're in a pretty good spot, healthcare capacity wise, with regard to COVID specifically. We did have, so there's another way that we look at COVID rates, and that is just straight transmission. That isn't this composite score. This really only applies to guidance for healthcare providers. We did reach a transmission level by itself of high between February 1st to February 9th. We're currently back in substantial. When this happens, there are just a couple of things that healthcare providers need to do per the DOH, the Washington State Department of Health guidance. So eye protection and wearing N95s for high-risk aerosol generating procedures. And we've been in contact with folks about that. We have been in substantial since late last week, and we're hoping that that continues. But these precautions need to be taken for 14 days after we're in a lower transmission level. I did want to mention, I know when we're looking at our report today, there's mention of 9 deaths due to COVID in the county. So just a little chat about how deaths get processed pretty carefully. So we look at the death certificate, we look at cause of death. So there's a lag time. So while they're reported as being in the last week, these deaths occurred, unfortunately, over a period of weeks, starting in early January. So, we do keep track, and there's a pretty significant verification process before these get counted. I wanted to talk a little bit about RSV and influenza. So good news is that transmission is minimal statewide. There was some transmission of influenza A for week 5. Per Washington State Department of Health surveillance, and our Thurston County rates do remain low for both influenza and RSV, which is excellent. A little bit of an MPOX update. So our state numbers ticked upwards slightly since the last time we met. So we're at 674 cases for the state, and a total of 3 Thurston County residents, including one, diagnosed in the past month or so. We do continue to be able, so we investigate all of these cases, and we continue to be able to offer vaccine to close contacts in alignment with CDC guidance. I wanted to close with one more piece of importance. So the CDC is actually tracking a multi-drug resistance Pseudomonas outbreak. So Pseudomonas is a bacteria that in this particular setting has become resistant to many of the common antibiotics that are used to treat it. And so the CDC has associated this with eye drops, particularly Esricare or Delsum Pharma's artificial tears. So folks that are using those, please stop. If your healthcare provider told you to use those, please reach out to your healthcare provider to talk about alternatives. And for folks that were using these products, if you have signs or symptoms of an eye infection, get care immediately. If you don't have symptoms, at this point in time, the recommendation is just to stop use of the eye drops, but there's no testing or anything recommended at this point in time along those lines unless folks have symptoms. And then our ask, of course, is to our provider community, as you identify cases, just to reach out and let us know so that we can coordinate testing and make sure that specimens get to the right place, so that we can keep track and keep this under control. And with that, I'm open to any questions you may have. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Any questions from the board? Yes, Board
Can't help
Vasquez.
myself. So at the federal level, the public health emergency is ending officially on May 11th. And I know that there are federal reporting requirements that, for instance, my agency, my day job, we have to do reporting. And as of May 11th or May 12th, some of those reporting obligations will cease. So I'm curious what continued reporting expectations are within Thurston County, since at the federal level, the HELSA reporting is going away on May 12th.
So I know that there's a lot of conversation at the state level. So we follow the Washington State Department of Health guidance, and we do have, there is a temporary rule in effect, I believe, that does require COVID-19 reporting within 24 hours. That's continuing. I know that as we move forward, I know that there'll be a lot of conversation as COVID transitions from the foreground to the background. And I'm happy to keep you updated as we become aware of those changes as they occur.
Great question. Board, Edward.
I got the same problem. I guess I'll preface this question, with there is a problem. And that problem is hospital care for our community in general. And it's old news now, but about, I don't know, a month ago or something like that, when I was talking to some of the folks involved, we had 68 patients up at St. Pete's that could have been released out of beds, but there was nowhere to release them to, for one reason or another. And that was plugging up the system. The hallways were full and overloaded. People were not able to get in through the emergency room process in a timely fashion. Some of them were there a whole day or more. Our medic units are being delayed because they can't leave the hospital proper because they're babysitting their patient. They can't even get them into the facilities. And so that applies both to our Medic One people and the fire agencies that are there that have responded. So I guess my question is there any talk amongst the health authority folks about trying to come up with a solution, whether that is like triaging who's gonna make it and who's not, and we're gonna try to do the best we can? I don't know what you're working on, but I hope, because I don't see that it's getting better. It continues to get worse, and unfortunately, usually these type of situations, when something really bad happens, Dr. Smith dies of his heart problem because he couldn't get in, or maybe a politician or the governor or somebody's gonna have a problem that is not taken care of, or one of their loved ones. And maybe that'll bring it to a head. But right now, it's like a third world country up there. And I don't know exactly what the solution, I've got some ideas, but I don't know if everybody agree with my ideas. They're kind of harsh. But we need to do something. And I just wonder if something is in the works that might be working towards alleviating that problem.
Yeah, so that's definitely a multifactorial problem. There's a piece of it. So we very much value our healthcare partners. So there's a piece of it where we're listening, and to what needs are. There's a piece of it. There's staffing and space are really big. Are definitely big issues. So I can say that there are folks working on different pieces of it, and I share the I do share that we are fully supportive of kind of that healthcare of that access to care piece, and as we move forward. I know that, so this is kind of this is a complex problem with a lot of parts. Some of the parts, there's a part of it that is within the scope of public health, in partnership with our healthcare partners, and there are other parts of it that kind of rest with other agencies. And I'm happy to kind of keep you updated as we participate as a local health jurisdiction in these conversations, and also as we collaborate with our healthcare partners to the extent that we can't help support them.
I guess maybe a follow-up to that. Our coroner reported that in 2022, we had 150 overdose deaths. And I'd say 7 or 8 years ago, we might have had 10. And if we were having that many deaths in traffic accidents, for an example, they'd be limiting the speed limit to 10 miles an hour or something. Somebody'd be trying to come up with a solution to solve the problem. So I think we are really behind the curve in overall health issues, wellness, I don't know how you want to refer to it, but everything's out of control and nobody seems to care. It's not getting fixed. We talk about it a little bit, but nobody's doing anything about it. But I'm afraid something is going to happen to some more influential citizens, loved ones or something, and then we're going to be reading about it in the paper about, well, what kind of a outfit is this? Are we in where, So I know it's a pretty broad question for you to come up with an answer standing at the podium, but I really do hope that we're working on these issues somewhere behind the scenes. We're the Board of Health. We're not working on it, so. Anyway.
I guess my question back is.
I can't hear you.
Oh, sorry.
Oh, you know what was happening? The microphone was cutting out on us as the power went out, I think, so. Go ahead.
Access to care is definitely something that that concerns all of us, and the life and well-being of every member of our community is important. And so I guess my question is as we identify opportunities as public health to work with folks and work to try to move the needle on this, would it be okay if we kept you all appraised as the Board of Health,
Sure, we'd like to know.
for
I
input?
think.
Any other questions from the board? Yes.
And on that, then as a person who's living this every day and seeing the impact on families and patients, I would say there are a lot of gaps in our community that perhaps we could call out and track and try to fill. So I would say a lot of those people sitting in the hospital, I've had a patient in the hospital for over 2 months because they're very complicated and there's no proper place for them to move to. They were being cared for in a foster home. And there's nowhere for them to go. There are people who are elderly who can't find a nursing home. There are kids in the ER who are suicidal and there's no bed for them. It's these kind of things perhaps where we could get innovative and be like, can we bring the care to them in a different way? Or can we build more of these services that are needed? One of the things I've seen in my career is a lot of these complicated kids are surviving into adulthood now. And there's no people who can really care for them, and there's no homes for them to be cared for in. So, I mean, I think if there are opportunities that come that we see, I think it's really important, and it is part of what's causing the burnout. Seeing it and seeing the people suffering and not being able to fix it or help, it causes you to feel like you're not doing a good job. So.
I'll add on as well. Thank you, Dr. A. I think she mentioned there's like multiple players, right, that are in the game and trying to make this work differently. And I do think that the Healthcare Authority, Department of Health, the state level are really kind of key players in this. It doesn't absolve us of responsibility. One of the things that I want to commit us to is making sure that we're advocating to the state agency as well of what we're seeing here at Thurston. We have limits to what we can't do at the local level when it comes to healthcare facilities, but doesn't mean that we don't have a strong voice and influence on this. So I think this is another role that we get to play and that you get to play as well as helping us as we advocate with state agencies because they have a lot more of the regulatory power and authority than we do in some of those situations. So just gonna sort of throw that out there as well as a role we have to play is to be advocates there. And then Commissioner, there's a lot of work happening behind the scenes on opioids. And I, as coming in, you've mentioned to me that you're interested in us maybe making that more public before the board. And it sounds like maybe we could have at a upcoming meeting sooner than later, some opportunities maybe to discuss our efforts. But I'm happy to work with you about how you want to structure that. But I would love to come before the board and talk specifically about the opioid crisis. I think that would be worthwhile for sure.
Any other questions from the board? Thank you, Doctor. Anything further before we adjourn?
Good job.
Meeting adjourned.
Seeing none, goodbye.